So we just had Mark up here talking about how to build connections with people in our communities. And I want to share about how completely by accident I learned how to connect with people that I'd never met before. So we all know that the past century has seen a population explosion. But do you know the scale of it? Just 100 years ago, we had 1.5 billion people on our planet. Today, over 7 billion. But we don't just have more people. 85 people in the world own as much wealth as the bottom 50% of the world's population combined. How many people is that? That's like saying 1/5 of the people in this room own as much wealth as half the world's population, over 3 billion other people. That's crazy. I'm 21. I can't even wrap my mind around that. How did the world let this happen? And we can all agree that population growth is threatening the very limited resources that we have available to us, right? And there are all sorts of people who are dealing with these issues on a grand scale, people who are dealing with environmental degradation, climate change, wealth inequality. But I've come to believe that the only way for us to begin addressing these issues is if we stop viewing other people as the other. So that's the question, right? How do we connect with others, especially those that we don't know culturally or linguistically? When I decided to bike from Berlin, Germany to Istanbul, I wasn't trying to answer this question. I was just trying to have an adventure. So I left Berlin with my friend Nicola, and we biked together for 2 weeks. We ended up in Budapest. And then Nicola left, and I biked by myself through Hungary and Serbia into Bulgaria. And for the last couple hundred miles, I was joined by my friend Andrew, and we biked to Istanbul. So I set off on this trip purely for the sake of having an adventure. No ulterior motives. And over the course of 6 weeks, 7 countries, and 1,700 miles, I realized something that profoundly changed how I perceive and interact with other people. It all started in Poland. It was a couple days into my trip, and it had been torrentially pouring rain. My gear and my bags were completely soaking wet. So were the flooded fields and cemeteries that I was biking through. And as another rainy evening approached, a woman came running out of her house and invited me to come inside and dry off and have dinner with her family. So there I was in this Polish living room, surrounded by complete strangers, eating homemade pizza, and in the back of my mind, I was marveling at the fact that this woman had appeared out of nowhere and invited me into her home. Of course, she looked at me with her kind, motherly expression. She told me what dozens of people would tell me throughout my trip. She slammed me down. She said, in no uncertain terms, I was crazy. That it was completely ridiculous for this 20-year-old girl from California to be biking 1,700 miles across some of the most rural, isolated, and impoverished parts of Eastern Europe. Now, maybe she was right, but traveling by bicycle gave me access to places that aren't connected by buses or trains. I pedaled through villages that aren't marked on any map. These places have no Google Street View. I'm talking gypsy shanty towns like this one in Serbia, and small villages in Turkey where kids still drive horses and carts down dirt roads. In all these places, something really interesting happened. My bicycle became a common point of interest that let me connect with people that I met. But there was more than that. I was exposed and frequently alone in places where no tourist in their right mind would ever visit. And this, in and of itself, my vulnerability, served as an invitation for people to approach me. And they did. To offer whatever they had available: food, shelter, advice, water, a friendly hello, a place to spend the night. I discovered that in making myself vulnerable, I was opening myself up for connection on the most simple yet deepest level. Which is interesting. It was interesting because everywhere I went, people told me that I was guaranteed to be mugged. In Poland, they told me to be careful in Slovakia, and in Slovakia, they told me to be careful in Hungary. And in Hungary, they told me to be careful in Serbia, and absolutely everybody told me to be careful in Turkey. Because you always have to be careful of the other guys, right? So, as people were telling me how crazy and dangerous this trip was, they were simultaneously doing everything in their power to be as generous and accommodating as humanly possible. Farmers gave me fresh produce. At gas stations, people would offer me cold bottles of water, or Coca-Cola, or cups of fresh coffee. And then I got to Turkey, the place where everyone told me that I, as a blonde Westerner traveling by bicycle, was guaranteed to be mugged, never to return. So when an imam approached me as I was resting in the shade of his mosque, the last thing I expected was for him to offer me a bag of fresh vegetables from his garden and a place to stay the night. This is one of my favorite photos. I was completely lost in Bulgaria. You can see this road isn't really a road, it's more of a dirt path. I had no idea where the road had gone. And these three boys, they didn't speak any English, I didn't speak any Bulgarian, and they found me and they helped me fix my flat tire. So mine is a story of being literally physically exposed. And maybe that's the secret or the key, that we have to trust others enough to expose ourselves, to get out of the insular nature of modern living, to walk or bike through our neighborhoods rather than drive. We live in a 24-hour news cycle that tells us over and over and over again that we're not safe. We can't trust others because the world is dangerous, society is dangerous, we have to lock our cars in our houses and build fences around schools and playgrounds, and kids can't walk to the grocery store by themselves. Now, I'm not trying to say that riding a bicycle in and of itself will address wealth inequality or make us view our cultural differences as a resource. But in the face of gentrifying cities and ever-increasing national and global disparity, it turns out it's not a bad start. So I want to invite you to find the courage to be vulnerable. Many of you are working on those grand solutions to the issues of our time, to climate change and environmental degradation and wealth inequality. But it'll take more than each of us working individually to produce something of value. We also have to be receptive to the people around us. In order to know what and how to give, we'll have to learn how and when to receive. It's imperative that we learn how to rely on the kindness of strangers. Thank you.